Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
As we tape this episode, Louisiana is in the middle of its fifth special session in the last 3 years. The budget deficits still loom, the fiscal cliff is upon us, and there seems to be no specific end in sight. State Representative Lance Harris, chairman of the Louisiana Republican Legislative Delegation, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
I've been doing business with LBIS for 25 years. They're dependable, trustworthy. It's just the attention to detail with our clients.
Our folks have years and years of experience. They're highly trained professionals. But many companies have that asset. What I'd like to think makes LBIS a bit different is that we use those talents in a way that truly is dedicated to serving the needs of the folks who depend on us.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety. Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Really pleased to be joined by State Representative Lance Harris. He is the chairman of the Louisiana Republican Legislative Delegation. Chairman, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
As we always say, there's a lot to talk about, and we'll jump into the fiscal cliff and the budget situations and those negotiations that you are heavily involved in and have been now for some time. But let's start with a little bit of personal interest. Tell us about Lance Harris, your background, your education, your family, and your business.
Well, I was raised in Pineville by a country doctor who was, he and my mom were missionaries to China, and that's where they settled because of LC. And then from Pineville, I went to Northwestern State University as a piano performance major, believe it or not, and ended up in the banking business. And from there, I was always an entrepreneur, and I dragged my wife to the library every Saturday and say, I want to start a business. And we ended up starting a convenience store chain, which at first it was more like a small market, and it just blossomed in 6 months, and then we grew, and then we have since been growing. We've gotten into agriculture. The last venture I've done is a production company where we bought a rodeo arena, and we do that. And so we do a lot of things. I've always been an entrepreneur, love business, been fairly successful at it, although I've had many that haven't been, and you pay the price for that, but that's great experience when you get into a job like this, working with the state and working on behalf of the state.
It really, I am sure, does give you great perspective in terms of being a small business person from the central part of the state, middle of Louisiana, coming to the legislature and bringing that experience to bear as you deliberate and you try to protect small businesses from the negative effects that government can have.
Absolutely. In fact, that's always been one of my bones of contention. We have so much that business is burdened with, and in the last 10 years, it's even gotten more and more with the ACA and some other things that we're very, very much in need of some changes to make sure that our small businesses grow and prosper. They're the largest employer. There's a lot of things that need to be changed in order to make the business environment better for them to flourish in turn, which would create wealth and create jobs. If we can get government out of the way, I think, as you're seeing, I think nationally now, the economy will boom.
It's, as a small business owner myself, I'm grateful to hear you say that. It really is the impact of continuing to feed and treat the symptoms of poverty and not focusing on the real cause of poverty. But let me ask you this question. So you're a successful businessman. You're in the middle of the state, Alexandria. You're doing well. 2011, you make the decision to run for office. Why?
Well, it was, we had one gentleman running unopposed. That was when the PAC groups were out funding opposition to any Democrats, and Chris Roy was the incumbent that decided not to run. And we had one gentleman running, and he had only lived in our district 7 years. And so 2 days before, I think 2 days before qualifying was over, I woke up and I said, this has to be a contested race. This is important. I told my wife, she said I was crazy. I said, I've got the gut feeling. I went and registered, told one of my best friends that night. We took them to dinner. They owned a bunch of McDonald's. I said, I'm going to run for the legislature. He said, well, I don't know if you've got the brains for it, but you sure have the hair for it. So we laughed, and we hit the ground running and we organized in 2 days, and the rest is history. And I got in it because I was concerned of the direction of the state. I was concerned about the business environment. I was concerned about some of the things that were happening to my own business at the time. So I'm glad I got in it. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve. It's been very difficult, but it's something that I think every business person is aware of. What needs to change and what needs to be done in state politics and state government to make sure we flourish. And that's what my goal is.
There's this old saying, right? Get into politics or get out of business. And you took that to heart and you really did it. I often ask legislators this question, Lance. What surprised you about serving in the legislature? What is something that you maybe didn't expect coming in that sort of hit you in the face and said, wow, that's not something I had looked forward to or expected in any way?
Well, I guess the biggest thing for me, there's two things. Number one, it wasn't as crazy as some in the public might want you to believe on the radio and stuff. Everybody I've run into down here, I haven't seen any kind of bribes or anything like that. Everybody's sincere. Right, it's not as crooked, and I think these are sincere people that are trying to do the best for the state in their perspective. The other thing that really surprised me was the actual lack of understanding some people have of the free enterprise system. And that was really hard for me to deal with the first year or two. There are some people that don't understand the profit motive, that not everybody wakes up and just gets a salary, but what drives our economy is a profit motive, which we have to have freedom of access and freedom of enterprise to get to that, which creates wealth, which in turn just really lifts the whole state as a whole. So I was surprised about that part of it because, and being from free enterprise and being an entrepreneur, having nothing when I began, that was a shock to me.
Got about a minute left in this segment, so let's talk about the drivers of the economy in central Louisiana. We hear a lot about military installation and the whole Cenla region trying to reinvent itself. Tell us today about the central Louisiana economy and what the real drivers are there.
Well, one thing that we have been fortunate with in the past is the military presence, but we also have several industries that's been there forever. Timber, agriculture. Believe it or not, a lot of our folks and my customers work offshore. So we have a pretty good blend economically. But I have to say the last 6 months has been very difficult in Cenla. We've had a huge economic slowdown due to the weather, also due to the fact that the oil patch is not what it used to be. So we've been dealing with that, and I feel like that we have some things on the cusp that are coming. I think we're prime and ready for that. So
Well, let's take a break. We come back. I want to jump into the fiscal cliff. We've talked a lot about that on this show over the course of the last few weeks and also on the radio show, the state budget, the budget that the governor has proposed and the cuts that are listed there and maybe what some of the solutions might be going forward. We're visiting with State Representative Lance Harris, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. State Representative Lance Harris, who is chairman of the Louisiana Republican Legislative Delegation, is our guest. So the fiscal cliff, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion of temporary taxes will expire at the end of this fiscal year, which ends June 30th, going into the new fiscal year, starting July 1. The governor, as he is constitutionally mandated to do, has presented a balanced budget. That budget is not pretty. There are deep cuts to higher education. There are some cuts to TOPS, additional cuts to health care. Give us your perspective, Lance, on the fiscal cliff. How do you see it?
Well, it started out, if you go back and remember, last year we tried to pass a budget out of the House that only appropriated 98% of the money that REC projected. So
revenue estimated.
That's correct. So we wanted to go with a 98% appropriation. And knowing that the fiscal cliff was coming, everybody knew this, that those taxes were temporary. So we began last year trying to address it. Had we done that, had we been successful, we lost by one vote on the House side for an amendment to go and put all the money back in the budget plus more with pay raises and other things that we knew were going to really increase the budget for this year. We would not have near the problem that we're dealing with now, but that's water under the bridge. What we're dealing with now is a fiscal cliff. We were able to visit with the administration throughout the months leading up to now to determine exactly what figure we were going to use. We weren't going to be able to fund continuation at the time. It was $548 million, quote, wish list, unquote. So these are the actual dollars you're talking about. And luckily, the federal changes were put into place. That's taken $302 million and put it on the table to reduce that fiscal cliff. So we're actually talking about a $680 million cliff now. Well, there are some things that we might have to do revenue-wise to address it, but I don't think there's any way or any chance, just judging from the votes on the floor, that's my job, that there will be 100% funded. So the way I see it is it's probably going to be broken into thirds, if for lack of a better word, and we're looking for a plan that is responsible, reliable, and fair. You know, the taxpayers, everybody acts like this $302 million that the federal changes brought, that Tinkerbell flew over Baton Rouge and just dropped it.
That's our money too, right?
Yeah. That's coming out of your pocket as a taxpayer already. Right. Then if we have to do something with a quarter of a cent, or if we have to, which we should do, which is take care of the exemptions on the pennies on the sales tax and kind of shore up your sales tax laws and your exemptions, that's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. So there should be something, in my opinion, left over that we have to put government on a diet. And then we have to assess our priorities. I think our speaker has done an excellent job, and I think the delegation has done an excellent job in demanding that there be some reforms accepted before we look at revenue. And they're going to be tied into those revenue bills. And look, those reforms they speak to the root of the problem. We're talking about Medicaid reforms, work requirements. We're talking about requirements on income when it comes to Medicaid, who qualifies, who doesn't. Then we're talking about the two most important, I think, which are spending cap and the Louisiana checkbook. And so I think if we get those reforms, it will help us in the long term. We're not thinking just next year. We're talking about long-term changes being written into the law this year as a start. And then we can or are successful in maybe renewing some of this revenue. And then with the cuts, where we go in the Appropriations Committee and we assign the priorities and we look at where we have to not appropriate, and we have a grand debate there, I think it's very manageable. And I think that would be the best outcome as far as the legislature that I would like to see.
You mentioned, taking this $600 million plus cliff that exists now with the influx of the money from the federal government, which again is our taxpayer dollars. And you think about what you're looking at there and the factions that exist around each of those, right? You've got the governor's office and the administration pushing in one direction. You've got the Republican delegation that has said these are the things that we have to have. You've got the Democrat delegation and the Black Caucus. You've got a lot of folks who are in the receiving end of a lot of these programs that might have to suffer some in the short term. How do you come to consensus now? Because that's the big issue, right? Is that these factions have not yet been able to coalesce around a specific goal. As we sit here and tape on Tuesday, the legislature has taken a day off, trying to come back with some sort of agreement. Where do we stand there?
I'm optimistic. I have meetings today with other caucus chairs. As House members, we're going to try to keep this process moving forward. But the fundamental issue, there are two philosophies at work. And one philosophy wants to grow government, and in order to grow government, they have to raise taxes and extract money out of the taxpayer's pocket, which in turn reduces your freedom as a taxpayer to make choices with your money. The other philosophy is that philosophy wants to control the size of government, which in turn controls the growth of taxes and hopefully lower them at some point, which in turn gives you more choices and freedom as a taxpayer and a citizen of the United States. That's the rawest form of the two philosophies at work here. So what we have to do is strike that tipping point. No one should be happy when we get to that compromise, and that's what everybody says, and that's where we're trying to go.
I want to come back and talk a little bit more about that. I also want to talk about some longer-term solutions that you mentioned. I want to talk about funding priorities like education and infrastructure development and maintenance, those things that are critically important to economic development. We're visiting with State Representative Lance Harris. He's chairman of the Louisiana Republican Legislative Delegation, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Representative Lance Harris is our guest. So, we talk about the philosophy in government that individuals should be able to keep more of what they earn, invest it, that creates jobs and opportunity, that lifts an economy, that pulls people out of poverty, which has just been devastating in Louisiana. We have to give folks more economic opportunity, not more government, I think is a general philosophy. But there are areas of government, priorities in government, that we must invest in to continue to create jobs and opportunity in our state. Education at all levels, K-12, higher education, our community and technical college system, a world-class system of infrastructure development and maintenance. You know as well as I do that if you drive on the highways, particularly in central Louisiana where we're both from, we've got to invest more in our highway system in our state. How do we do that, and how do we balance investing in those priorities with ensuring that government is always right-sized?
Well, I think first of all, you do have to name your priorities. And one of the biggest issues that I have, and everybody knows it, is I'll give you an example. The movie tax credit. We have already certified $114 million this year in this budget we are in now for movie tax credits. And we're cutting TOPS. We're cutting higher education. We're cutting health care. Those things that should be priorities. And every study that you've seen, we're losing 82 cents on the dollar that we spend in movie tax credits. We're actually paying for Walmart's advertisements. We're paying for Popeye's advertisements. My advertisements aren't being paid for, so those are the kind of priorities we have to debate and discuss. And then when we look at all the tax credits, we look at everything, we have to make sure that we're not picking winners and losers. That starts with what are our priorities, and you hit it. It's got to be education. It's got to be some of these things that lift our state up. So I think that discussion is going to be had in the future because this is continual. And it didn't just start now. Right. You go back to 97, they had a budget crisis. 2003, they had $750 million in a $6 billion budget. So we've got to start that conversation. And to your infrastructure piece, there's a lot of things that we need to discuss. We have to have infrastructure. Last year, there was some talk of a gas tax, but I think that we need to broaden that discussion. We need to look at possibly the sales tax on vehicles. Why? Because it will cover your electric vehicles, it will cover your driverless vehicles that are coming, it will cover everything. If we look at some new ways of thinking about infrastructure, and how to pay for it. A dummy like me that buys a new car every 2 years, I'm the user, I'm the prime user. That's where it's going to hit. It's not going to hit my person in Hineston, Louisiana that drives 90 miles round trip every day to work.
Yeah. Let's talk about long-term solutions. We hear a lot of people use the analogy that you can't remodel your house while it's on fire. We've got to fix this fiscal cliff. But at some point, we've got to think about long-term solutions and remodeling the structure so that it doesn't catch fire every year, right? Things like pushing more responsibility down to local government. Things like a more stable and growth-oriented tax structure. The regulatory policy of our state. Things like you mentioned, this Louisiana checkbook that bring more transparency to our spending. What is your belief in terms of the viability of real long-term solutions, maybe in the form of a constitutional convention?
I think that when I first got here, that was unheard of. Everybody was against it. No, you would never know what blends you might get of the individuals representing their areas to make the constitutional convention. I think that the interest is there now because we see how ingrained a lot of these institutional policies and procedures are. And they're very difficult to deal with. You hear about tax reform day in and day out, tax reform. That's somebody's different opinion, and some people that means raising more money. To some people it means trying to go with a flat level tax. So we probably have to go down that road at some point, and I think the interest is there. We've got some good reforms this session that go a long way to resolving it. The spending cap, for instance. We need a spending cap in the state of Louisiana that is predicated on economic indicators, not on just how much money we can spend as a government. If our economy is only growing at 1%, our government surely shouldn't grow more than that. So we've got something like that, the checkbook, and it's small steps for now. But I think that the Constitutional Convention idea is catching fire.
20 seconds, your message to the business community as someone who is going to be heavily involved in the solutions.
Contact us, especially small business. We hear from large business through LBIS and some of these organizations, which is great. We need to hear from individuals. We need to hear from small business and, of course, our constituents. And they've got to get involved. They've got to stay involved so we have the wherewithal to push for these reforms and to repair what we need to.
Representative Lance Harris, thanks for your time, man. Thanks for the work that you're doing. We're going to be watching it closely. It is critically important to the future of business and economic development in our state that we begin to look at long-term solutions for these seemingly never-ending issues that we find ourselves in.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.